Welcome to your Apple Update. I'm your host, John Sherrod, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about Apple Watch. Last week, Apple held its annual September media event where it introduced a whole bunch of new products, including the iPhone 11 and iPhone 11 Pro, which we're going to talk about in a future video. But in this one, we're going to talk about Apple Watch. Apple announced the Apple Watch Series 5, and so we want to look at what's new. Is it something that you need to upgrade to, especially if you bought one last year? Let's kind of get into all that. So, one of the things that Apple started out this part of the presentation with was this really touching health video. And they've done a few of these in the past, but it was a video featuring real-life Apple Watch customers whose lives have been either saved or positively impacted by having the Apple Watch. And it's one of those things where when you watch it, when I watched it, I was close to kind of being in tears. I mean, it was just really that emotionally impacting. I thought they did a great job of they actually had people use FaceTime. Like, they did a FaceTime call with real people, so it didn't look like this really super polished thing where they brought people into a studio. It just looked really authentic and real because these were real stories from people whose lives have been positively impacted. And I thought that was awesome. And that's one of those things where if you work for Apple, that's one of those why you get up in the morning and work kind of thing. So I thought that was a really nice thing that everybody that works at Apple, especially the people that work on the Apple Watch team, or even if you work in retail selling Apple Watch, that you should be really proud that you get to take part in that part of Apple's product story. That was really cool. It's something that I think about. I am getting older. I'm in my upper 30s. I had grandparents, two grandfathers who both had heart and stroke issues in their 50s. And so the older I get, the more I think about being cognizant of my health. And I love having, the features of the Apple Watch where I can, track my heart rate and be able to do the ECG and do that kind of thing. So I can just kind of be a little more mindful of my health on a daily basis. And it's also something that I use for fitness. And it was something that back in 2016, I used to help me lose 50 pounds actually. And being able to track it on that was really good. So me too. I was one of those people whose lives was positively impacted by Apple Watch. So cool to see it. They also announced some new health research initiatives, and this is something that they have done in the past. They had a big heart health study where basically people opted in. It was not something that was done automatically, but you opt into these Apple Health research initiatives. And with the heart one, Apple was kind of anonymously getting heart feedback data from Apple Watches from thousands and thousands of customers, and using that to have a better understanding of what it looks like to track heart health with a device like that. And they partner up with universities and research companies, medical research companies, that sort of thing. And they announced a couple of new ones on stage as well. And this is one of those things where if you're interested, Apple has an Apple Health Research app you can download. It's always opt-in, and Apple says that they collect data in a way that can't be tracked back to you directly. So it's one of those things where you don't have to worry about your privacy being at stake when you get involved in. So definitely check that out if you're interested. So as far as the new watch itself, the big new feature of Apple Watch Series 5 is something that really all of us have wanted from the first version of the Apple Watch, and that is always on display. Right now, when you use the Apple Watch, I don't know if I can show on the video, but you raise your wrist, it's so instantaneous, it's happening. You can kind of see it flash there for a second, but the screen is in an off position, and when you raise your wrist, it lights up so you can see it. And that's always been there because of battery management. You don't want to have your Apple Watch draining your battery down to zero and running out of juice because of the display being on when you don't need it to be on, because if you don't have your wrist up, you don't need it to be on. But it's also kind of a pain to have to kind of raise your wrist, and if you're not at just the right angle, you have to kind of do this thing where you twist your wrist a bunch of times before you get it to actually come on the way you want to. They had a joke on stage about how if you're in a meeting, you can't sneak a peek at the watch because, if your wrist isn't angled right, you can't see the display. And that's something that in some context or another, probably all of us have experienced that kind of thing if you're an Apple Watch wearer. So the new Apple Watch Series 5 has an always-on display. And, that seems kind of simple, but there was actually a lot of hardware engineering that had to go on behind the scenes, as well as software engineering. So it's not just a matter of putting a higher capacity battery in the Apple Watch. They actually talked about a brand new display type and some new power management hardware and software that goes into it, in addition to, I'm sure, enhanced battery technology that allows for this to happen in such a way that you still get that 18-hour battery life. You don't compromise any battery life from what was on the Apple Watch Series 4, for example. Now, if you want to get as much battery life as possible out of the Apple Watch Series 5, you actually can disable that feature so that it goes back to the same old raise your wrist to turn on that the Apple Watch has always had. But this was a really big announcement for Apple Watch because everyone's been wanting it for a long time. It's definitely something that I was like, ooh, I don't know that I need to buy a new Apple Watch this year, but I definitely want that feature. So even though it's not on the watch that I have, the Apple Watch Series 4, I'm glad that it's there, and it's going to be great going forward for all new generations of Apple Watch. And it's pretty neat too, because they even have always on for complications. Those are the extra features on the watch screen, like a stopwatch or the weather or whatever it is, that you'll be able to still see those even when you're not looking directly at the screen, even when you haven't raised your wrist to see the screen. Those will still update. And also exercise. They're being kind of smart about what information shows up and what doesn't when you're in this always on but not raised to where you're looking at it view of the Apple Watch. But pretty cool what they've tuned and how they've kind of dialed that up to do that. Another thing that we have for the Series 5 is a built-in compass. And that may not seem like a big deal at first. Certainly you can imagine scenarios where you're on a hike and you're looking directly at the compass app where that could come in handy. But I think where it's really going to shine is in third-party apps. So they use the example of, or first-party apps also. So they use the example of if you're in maps, you can just kind of move your body to reorient the map to where you're facing, just like you've been able to on the Apple Watch for a long time. Or they use an example of a constellation tracking app where you just kind of move your body, and as you're looking at the watch, it changes to show you what constellations are in the sky where you're pointed. So things like that can be a really nice thing. But like I said, in a hike, it could also be a really useful thing so you don't get lost in the woods. So again, nice to have extra sensors in the Apple Watch always. We also have international emergency calling, and I don't off the top of my head remember how many countries it was, but it was something like 150 countries. If you need to make an emergency call where you use the side button to initiate that, you can do that, and it will call the emergency number in the country that you're in. Now, this is only going to work if you have one of the cellular Apple Watch models, which I don't, so that wouldn't help me. But that's a nice feature to have. That can save your life right there if you have the ability for your watch to dial 911 in whatever country you're in and have you get emergency help when you need it. So that is really awesome. And we've got some new cases. So ceramic is back. Ceramic is a high-end watch material, and Apple's not the first company to do this by far, but it's one of those, Apple it's clear from the beginning of Apple Watch that Apple loves the watch industry and the history of watchmaking and watch materials and strap designs and things like that. And so they like to have some different materials. Now, I think it's fair to say, and Apple doesn't break these numbers out where we can see a pie chart, but I think it's probably fair to say that the overwhelming number of Apple Watch purchasers are purchasing an aluminum model. That's what I have. I have the Nike Plus Apple Watch. But they have also had stainless steel for a long time, and that's still in the lineup. And of course, they had gold in the very first year. That's the only year that they've ever done that. But ceramic is one of those models that they had in the Apple Watch Series 2 and 3, certainly with the 3, I think with the 2 also, and that disappeared from the lineup with the Series 4. And I'm sure that they sold a very small number relative to the overall number of Apple Watches sold because it was a much higher price watch. But I'd love to see Apple tinkering with things like that, and I was disappointed to see it disappear last year, and I'm glad it's back this year. So that's really cool to see, and totally new to the Apple Watch this year is an optional titanium case, and they showed that off on screen. And again, that's a higher ticket item, so certainly someone who's fashion conscious and less budget conscious is going to be more in the target range for that. But also, if you're someone who really wants to have as little weight on your wrist as possible, the titanium case is going to be a lighter case. And for some people, that's a really big deal. Just like for some people, they choose the little MacBook model because it's the thinnest and lightest one, and that's what they prioritize. So for people like that, the titanium Apple Watch case is a really nice thing. And another really nice thing that Apple did, of course, the Apple Watch starts at $399 or $499 for the cellular model, but they said we're keeping the Series 3 in the line and we're moving that to $199. And so I think Apple's going to move a lot of those this holiday. That was perfect timing for the holiday upcoming shopping. $199 is going to move a lot of those, and the Apple Watch Series 3 is still a great Apple Watch. So if you haven't purchased an Apple Watch yet and you're kind of wanting to get into it without dropping a ton of money, an Apple Watch Series 3 is a great way to jump in at $199. And if you love it, great. You might even say, well, I'm going to sell it. They keep their resale value pretty well, and you can go ahead and upgrade to a Series 5. Or if you don't like it, again, you can resell it, and you haven't lost much in the process. So that's what's going on with Apple Watch. Of course, watchOS 6 is coming out not too long in the future here, so I'll have an episode on that when that comes out. Do you have any questions about Apple Watch? Are you planning to purchase a Series 5? I'm going to stick with my Series 4 this year. The always on screen is super tempting, but I'm going to wait for the next generation and see what Apple's got on hand there. That's it for this episode of Your Apple Update. I'm your host, John Sherrod. Hit that like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you next time.